Good morning, y'all. So we're back up in the shop today, and we are going to upgrade the Cherokee's radius arm, long arm suspension to a true 4-link. So I figured this would be a good time. We'll talk about the Cherokee front suspension. So on your Cherokee, you've got, for lack of a better term, we'll call it a frame. It is a frame, but it's part of the unibody. So this is the front. This is your axle here. So from the factory, you have a 4-link suspension. So on each frame rail, this is the same on each side, you've got a control arm coming down. So 4 links, 1, 2 on one side, 1, 2 on the other. And these are what's called a short arm. So if you look at lift kits and you're looking at a short arm lift kit, you're limited because you only have so much of an arc that you can do. See, this will only move so far up and down with these short arms. So when you go to look at a lift kit, the next step above a short arm is a long arm. So when you do a long arm, generally what's going to happen is you're going to come in back here where the transmission cross member is, and you're going to replace it with a different cross member, and then you'll have longer arms coming out. Now, there's several different kinds of long arm suspension. You've got the radius arm suspension, which is what I've got now, and that looks like, hold on. So if you got the radius arm, you'll see you got the long arms coming from the transmission cross member there, and it comes up, and then your top control arms, instead of coming from a separate place on the frame like they did in the factory 4-link, they're actually coming off of these bottom ones. So it's not a true 4-link. It's what's known as a radius arm. The problem with those is they're just fine for on the street, and they're fine for mild off-road. But if you articulate a lot, you'll find, like I have, that you basically destroy the bushings every single time you go out. So this has another arm here, and that's a radius arm. So and that's basically the lowest tier of your long arm suspension is the radius arm. And they work, but like I said, you destroy bushings articulating too much. Definitely better than the short arm, but can still be improved upon. So the next step above that is, instead of having the radius arm, you'll have a true 4-link. So you'll have inside the frame rail here on the cross member, there'll be another mount, and the bar will come down, so you'll have a 4-link again, and that's better. And then there's also the 3-link, which is basically the same thing as a 4-link, but you've only got one top control arm. That articulates more, but it also puts a lot more stress on the mounting point of that top arm, so you have to majorly reinforce it. So what we're going to do today is, this thing, when I bought it, it had a rough country long arm suspension on it, which is a radius arm system, and we're going to be replacing those radius arms and the cross member with a Rusty's 4-link. And the other thing too is your less expensive lift kits, like this rough country that came on this when I bought it, the cross member for the transmission is one piece. And the problem there is that if you need to pull your transmission or transfer case, you cannot do it without taking all of your suspension off, because the cross member that's holding your transmission and transfer case is where your suspension bolts up. It's all one piece, so you can't take the cross member out. You got to take all these control arms off too. So the new one I've got has these pieces that will mount on the frame rails of the XJ, and then it has a center cross member that you can pull off and pull your transmission and transfer case without having to pull your suspension off. So you get that advantage too. So I've got the body up on some jack stands, taking a little bit of pressure off of this suspension, so we can go ahead and strip all this old stuff off. So I'm going to get all this old suspension stripped off. Basically, if you're upgrading from one of these rough country suspensions, you're basically going to pull your control arms and radius arms and the cross member, and then go back with this new stuff. So I'll get to pulling all that off, and then we'll come back and start installing the new parts, and we'll go through that. I know we've got one bolt on here that's broke off. I'm gonna have to get the broken off piece out of there. It was like that when I bought the truck, and hopefully nothing else will break, so we'll see. Let me get started on that, and I'll be right back with putting the new stuff on. Alright, we got the old control arms and radius arms off. You can see that one's a little less than straight. And now we've got to get a jack under the transfer case and get that one piece rough country cross member off. Once we get that out of the way, then there's one that I know for sure, there's one broken bolt we've got to take care of, and we'll get to putting the new stuff on. So we'll be back with that. Alright, we've got the old rough country cross member off. So now, well, we got that off. Before we start putting the new stuff on, I'm going to chase the threads in all the holes. I got one broken bolt I got to try to get out. And also I noticed the transmission mount. So right here you can see this is the original, and there's the replacement. You can see how wore out that damn thing is. It ain't doing nothing. So we're going to put that in there. Also I bought the whole set with the motor mounts too, so I don't know if I'll get to those this weekend, but definitely going to slap this in there while we got the cross member off. So once I get all those little things taken care of, then we'll come back and put the new stuff on. Okay, so I've got these two brackets in their preliminary locations. That's the passenger, and there's the driver over there. But we have run into the first snag right here. This exhaust pipe is all up in the way because it hangs down too low. But the good thing is, sorry about the camera flying around, I kind of anticipated that problem, and we've got a new exhaust right there. So I'm going to cut that section of the exhaust out of the way and get it out of the way so we can continue with putting this bracket in, and then we can put the cross member in. And once we get that all bolted up, sorry about that, hit the wrong button on the camera. So once we get all that bolted up, then we can there's some holes we got to drill for those brackets and put more bolts in the frame and through the floor through the pinch weld, and then tighten everything down. Then we can put our control arms on. So let me get this exhaust cut out of here, and then we'll get back. I'll get back with you when we're drilling all the bolt holes that we got to drill. Okay, so this is where we are now, and I apologize for not filming as much of this as I normally would, but I've got to get all this done this weekend before band camp or band competition starts with my daughter. So we've got these side brackets, have these 3 bolts. 2 of them are also in my leg for my slider. So you got to drill those holes, and then you got this flag nut you got to stick back in there, and if you've ever dealt with those, you know how big of a nightmare they are. So we got this side done. Now we got to hop over to the other side and get that done and get them all started, and then we can finally start torquing all this stuff to spec. So let me get the other holes drilled in the other side and get that flag nut in there and get the bolts in. And then once we get everything torqued and get the transmission sitting back in its mount, then there's 3 holes along the top that go through that pinch seam up there. We'll have to drill those, and there's a strip of studs that go through from the top, and then nuts go on them, so it ties it into that too. But one step at a time. Let me get to the other side and get that done. All right, we are back. Had to take a little break, run up to the school, fix a generator for the band again, and had to actually go in the house and put a shelf together for my wife. So now back to this. Let me show you where we're at here. So we now have the cross member installed, everything torqued down. The transmission is now mounted to the cross member again. We got all these brackets in, and the last thing we've got to do, all that's torqued down, so the last piece of the puzzle before we can put the control arms on is this strip of bolts. You can see these holes right here. Those are going to go up through this pinch seam. So we got to drill those and put they've actually got these strips with studs on them that'll go down through there. And then you put nuts on the bottom here. So once we get those on and torqued down, then we can put the new control arms on. So let me get those drilled out, and we'll get them put in, and I'll bring you back to set up the control arms. Okay, we are finally done with the cross member. We got this last row of bolts here going through the pinch seam in the floor in. And if you have rock sliders like I do, where that one bolt's hidden up above there and you can't drill, what you do is drill the first 2 holes here and here, and then take the it comes with a piece of metal with the studs sticking out of it, the 3 studs, and so you can use those 2 holes and that piece of metal with the studs and drill your top hole down through the from the top. So, and there is, it's tight, but if you start that nut on there first before you do the other ones and get it run up, there is enough room to get it on there. So now that that's done, we can finally get to putting on these new control arms. So there they are. We got the bottoms and the tops. So they got a chart in the instructions, tells you the distance between from hole to hole to measure and set them at. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then come back when we go to put them on. So let me get busy with getting these measured out. Okay, y'all, I got these things set up to the preliminary measurements, and now I'm going to start to wrestle them into place underneath here, and hopefully, I got my fingers crossed, my jack stands won't be in the way. So I don't know how well this is going to show up on the camera, but we'll give it a shot. Ooh, that's going to be close. Try to not let this thing smack me in the head. So close. Well, after a full day of fighting me at every step, that just fell into place. Hopefully this other side does the same. Let me go grab it. I honestly can't believe that went that well. So those are in, and now we've got to get our uppers and get ready to put them in, and we'll have to set the kind of set the caster. So let me get those ready and then I'll be back with them. Good morning. It is day 2 on getting these control arms put in. I was hoping to get all this done yesterday, but well, where you saw the last segment left off, the bottom 2 control arms basically fell into place. They were easy as pie to put in. Well, things went downhill from there. So I had to wrestle these upper ones, and what I ended up doing was I looked through all my crap, and I took this fine thread bolt and this lug nut and made this thing to stick in between the 2 ears and spread them open to get the upper control arms into their spots. But now they're all mounted. Get down here where we can see. So now we have upper control arms, lower control arms, everything is in there. The bolts are loose because you don't want to tighten any of those bolts until you have the weight of the vehicle sitting on it at ride height. So I'm going to go ahead and take this thing down off of the jack stands and tighten and torque all those bolts, and then we'll talk about your adjustments and alignment type stuff. So let me get busy with that. Alright, so we've got our long arms installed now. I went ahead and torqued all the bolts. Everything is in place. It's down off the jack stands. So we're good there. So let's talk about what adjustments can you make with the suspension, with the control arms and such, because that's a question you see come up a lot. Hopefully you'll be able to see this. Alright, so on your suspension you have several different things you can adjust. You got your caster, you got camber, you got toe, and then you got track and wheelbase. And each one of these, hold on just a second, I gotta get the cap for the stupid pen. Where the hell did it go? Ah, there it is. Ugh. Sorry about that. Okay. So we'll talk about these one at a time. So your first thing when you install the control arms, the lower, you've got your wheelbase. Wheelbase is adjusted with the lower control arms. assuming yours are adjustable. This is not about a stock Cherokee. I don't know how those work. But if you have long arm suspension or a lift, your adjustable lower control arms is where you adjust wheelbase. Wheelbase is the distance between the front and the rear wheels. Okay? Now, when you install your lower control arms, if you adjust them to the exact same length, then you should be good. Unless you got a bent frame or something, wherever you've got your control arms hooked to the frame, you should be good. So that's where you set your wheelbase. Now, your track is set by your track bar, or sometimes called a panhard bar. And what that does, if you look at your track bar, which is, if you don't know, that bar that goes up and hooks to the frame up there and hooks to the axle over here. The one that, so that is adjustable. And what that does when we're talking about track is the relation of your front axle to the rear axle side to side. So if this is your truck, your rear axle is set by the leaf springs, so it's not adjustable, right? So your front axle has adjustment side to side so that it can match the rear axle, and that's adjusted by your track bar. The way you measure that is you measure from the side of the frame rail to the you can measure to the back of your tire, or even better, to the back of your backing plate on your axle on each side, and they should be even. So the next thing we have is camber. And camber, the only way to adjust your camber, and what camber is if you're looking at the front of the vehicle and you got your axle and you got your tires here, and sometimes you'll see a vehicle and the tires all messed up like that. So this angle, that is your camber. And on your Cherokee, the only way to adjust that is to put in offset ball joints. But you shouldn't have to adjust it unless you've got some serious bending problems. So camber is pretty much, you don't have to worry about it. It's pretty much going to be what it is. Which brings us to the one that everybody always seems to have trouble with. Caster. So, caster is also pinion angle. Well, you're measuring two different things, but they're adjusted by the same thing. So, caster and pinion angle are always going to be a compromise. In order to get the best caster, you're going to have a bad pinion angle. In order to have a good pinion angle, your caster is not going to be so great. Luckily, you can run the caster all the way down to 0 degrees and still be fairly drivable, maybe even 1 or 2 negative. But the problem is, if you get too negative on your caster, then you wander all over the place. Even zero caster, you're going to wander some. So what you're actually measuring is an angle. Let me see if I can draw this for y'all be able to get it. So if you're looking at your vehicle from the side, and this is your front wheel, and behind here you got your C with your two ball joints, right? And then your steering knuckle, which I'm not going to draw in because it'll block our view of the C. So you got your two ball joints. Caster is a degree measurement on like a clock here. This is your caster angle, the angle running between these two ball joints. So if this is the front of the vehicle and this is the rear, right? If your caster angle is leaning this way, so it's, say it looks more like this, this is positive caster. If your upper ball joint is leaning towards the front, like this is negative caster. So that's the angle that you're measuring with your, usually you can get a digital one, but you can use the old analog one too. So if that's that way, then that's negative. If it's that way, then it's positive, if you were looking at that. So this is adjusted by your upper control arms, your adjustable upper control arms. They will push that axle forward or back depending on how you adjust them. The bottom control arm, so you got your bottom control arm, and then you got your axle here, and then you got your upper. So the bottom is a pivot, and the upper control arm tilts that axle back and forth on this axis of the lower control arm. And that's how you adjust your caster. So you would think that, well, no problem, I'll shorten my upper control arms up and that'll give me a bunch of positive caster, and the more positive caster you have, the better it's going to ride and steer. But the problem comes because in relation to your two ball joints, you got a pinion and a drive shaft. So if you're looking at the side of your differential and you got your U-joint here and your drive shaft, and this is your cover over here, right? This is your pinion angle. So just in line with this drawing, if you have too much positive caster, your pinion angle starts to point down. Too much negative, it points up, but you don't really want negative, so that's never really an issue. So it's always a compromise. You have to compromise between too much pinion angle and enough caster. It's a pain in the behind for sure. So that's caster. And then the other thing we've got is toe. Now toe won't have anything to do with replacing your control arms. Toe is adjusted, that's your tie rod. So you got a tire here and a tire here, and you got the tie rod in between them. So if you shorten the tie rod, it pulls the tires in that way, right? Pigeon-toed, so to speak. That's towed in. If you make the tie rod longer and toe out, right? What you ultimately want is zero toe or slightly towed in, like a 16th. Now that I've said that, if you really want 100 opinions, just ask on a forum. You'll get 1,000,000 of them. But you basically want your toe, 0 to a 16th, either way. No more than that, because then you start wearing your tires funny. So that's basically it. That's all the adjustments you can make. Now I'm not gonna, normally I would video myself doing that on this thing, but I already did it, and I was pissed off because yesterday went so crappy. And the other thing is, every build is different, and you got to adjust to the realities of what you got. Frame might be tweaked, different size stuff, different systems. There's no one size fits all for this stuff. So that's it. That has been replacing the control arms on the old Cherokee, upgrading to a 4-link. Hopefully this video has helped you out, and we'll see you in the next one. Y'all have a good one.